All right, there we go. And I'm going to expand these slides. This is always the part where it decides to be slow and touchy. Okay, so thank you. Welcome for coming and being a part of our COVIDeo series with our Food Co-op Initiative. This was originally going to be our last session of the COVIDeo series when we scheduled it. There are 2 more next week. I'll mention those at the end. I might mention them throughout because they were unable to schedule before we were wrapping up the series, but they were topics that either you requested or that, well, both were topics you requested and that we felt were important. So there will be a couple more next week, but this was kind of Food Co-op Initiative's opportunity to say, here's what we think we've learned and what we'd like to share with you through this series about these times. Keep in mind, everything we share today is still in process. Anyone who is working with co-ops right now will tell you, we know some things, we have some guesses about some things, some educated guesses about things, and there are things we don't know. And hopefully we'll be pretty clear about which things are which today. This is the big picture, startups post-COVID-19. So quick housekeeping, again, you don't have to video right now. We'll get into, if we're discussion, it'd be great though if you want to join the conversation, if you can be on video. If you can't, we understand, but it does enrich the conversation. Mute if you're not speaking. We are expecting dozens of folks today and it can upset the sound. And remember, the call is being recorded. So if you're on screen, if you are on screen and you're talking or you're sharing an idea, just remember that will be part of this video, which will be put out publicly on a YouTube channel. Our check-ins are happening via chat, as I said earlier. And in general, because we're expecting so many folks, we will start the conversation with questions going into the chat. Now, keeping in mind, this was supposed to be a presentation by our entire team, and both of my other team members, Michaela, our Director of Development, and Stuart Reed, our Executive Director, had last-minute emergency call situations, and I'm doing this one solo. Now, I developed the content with them, and I developed the overview and was planning to be lead on the call anyway, but I am going to be managing the chat and the entire conversation. So probably there'll be times I pause and go to the chat and start bringing up some of the questions, but I will not be peppering them throughout the presentation because of that situation. All right, so do throw in the chat your questions, your comments, and you don't have to wait until I say it's time for questions. If you want to get some thoughts down so you don't forget, get a question there so you don't forget. Sometimes a side conversation kind of develops amongst you and your peers over in the chat. Feel free to do that. That's okay. Use it however you like. All sorts of fun conversations sometimes happen there. All right, so we thought about where to start today, what to talk about. Like, there's so much, and we're trying to do, well, that was a mistake. We're trying to do an overview. So this is the problem. I try and open the chat. Okay, I see other new people in the room. Riverside, Westchester, Maggie's here again from Cooperative from New England. Nice to have you. So when we were deciding how we were going to have this conversation with you all, we really want this to be an overview. So we're not going to have time to go in depth on a lot of these pieces. And actually, everything that we're going to say today is distilled from previous COVIDeo sessions with all sorts of experts. And we'll try to remember to give nods in all the places to who brought some of that wisdom forward. And we even have on some of the slides where you can find more on that exact topic in the COVIDeo series, what video to go back and take a look at. So this is an overview. This isn't, we're going to dive into this this thing that I said about funding and pull that apart. If we get time at the end, we might do that. But we're trying to say, what's the synopsis of everything we've heard and learned so far from the COVIDeo series? What do we know now about, what is it, 2.5 months later from when this began on April 1st? Month and a half later. Oh my God. I have completely lost track of time in the post-COVID world. All right. So let's start here. We're gonna start with, there are 3 areas of work. If you haven't heard this before, I'm gonna go over this briefly in food co-op development. And the board has oversight of all 3, responsibility for them. So there's the area of governance, the area of outreach and ownership, and the area of business development. And we're gonna take each area one at a time and spend a little more time about what we've learned in that area from different presentations. Area number 1 is going to be business development. There's the most to say here, but in some ways what we have to say here is the most straightforward. So we decided to start here. When I say business development, what I mean is specifically, did I go for it? I did. What we mean specifically is the part where you develop the co-op's business. involving people, getting people to become owners, developing the vision, going out and doing events, upping communications, upping your visibility in the community, becoming part of the community. That's all under ownership and outreach. Business development is the other piece of the work you're doing, which is actually developing a multi-million-dollar business. It's complicated work, and we're specifically talking here about, as a team of volunteers, coming up with locations, pro formas, testing feasibility, market studies, figuring out how you're going to fund this thing, making all sorts of decisions to start a very complicated business. So that's what falls under business development. First place we're going to focus a little bit in business development is market studies. If you didn't catch Debbie Swasuna's session, Market Studies Post-COVID-19, you can find that on our YouTube channel. It is available to all. What we know, the synopsis is, market studies will continue for the foreseeable future to be done the same way they've been being done. And that's because of a couple of factors. One of them is that we don't have new data. Market studies are done off existing data. They're not made up out of thin air. They're based on what we already know about grocery stores and food co-ops and their ability to perform in different environments, in different types of buildings with different kind of ingress, all sorts of things. And we can't make that data up. That wouldn't be responsible. So they're working from data that already exists. So they will continue to do it that way. But another factor is, historically, food co-ops have been able to perform the same or even slightly better sometimes through recessions. So we don't have a reason to predict that food co-ops won't, basically, that the sales aren't accurate. We don't really have any reason to assume that that would be the case. It feels like it after COVID-19. It feels like a whole bunch of stuff just shifted. But in reality, the way that people are spending their grocery dollars has not negatively shifted for grocery stores. And while some of it has shifted online, and I hope a lot of you were actually at Michelle Schrei's session this week from National Cooperative Grocers about online ordering, curbside, and delivery, not as many dollars have shifted to delivery, online, and curbside as people think, because it's become a larger factor in all of our lives and more visible, and a whole bunch of us who've never tried it before have tried it in some form since COVID-19. And so it's very big in our consciousness right now, and it's certainly something we have to keep looking at and discussing, but it hasn't shifted the way people grocery shop as much as we think. And so right now, it makes sense to continue to predict sales in a very similar way to how we always have. And again, for more in-depth thought on that, please do see Debbie's session on market studies post-COVID-19, where she goes into more depth. So we also don't have enough data right now to say even what it has or hasn't done necessarily to food co-op sales. We do know that a lot of food co-ops are now seeing a lot of sales growth, even post the hoarding phase. We also know a lot of co-ops are seeing losses in sales, and it's about 50-50. Michelle brought this word the other day, and there are some clear patterns. A lot of those co-ops that are doing poor are in areas where there has been rules and laws created about how many people can be inside a store at a time, and so they've had to greatly decrease their foot traffic. If store co-ops that have not had that put in place are not consistently having as much impact. We also know co-ops in college towns were impacted more deeply in some cases because a whole bunch of their customer base went home. So some of these things, the co-ops that are doing more poorly through this situation, we see some trends, but we're going to need a lot more data before we know for sure why. And then there are co-ops that are seeing huge growth, 10, 20, 30% at the same time. And we're also going to need a lot more information than just a couple months to know why and be able to talk about that. The other thing we don't have is we don't have enough data to say whatever we find out now about, okay, when we have enough data at the end of the year and say, okay, well, this is kind of what happened, and we see these trends and this is why. It actually won't tell us a whole heck of a lot necessarily about what's going to happen next. We still don't have clarity on what happens next in so many ways in this society right now. Supposedly, we just got announced we are now in a recession. Everyone saw that coming. But again, food co-ops have overall done well. The grocery industry does well in a recession. Dollars switch from restaurants to home cooking and grocery stores. So there's no reason yet to panic or to be certain in any sense that your sales marketing projections are necessarily incorrect in any way. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't say you shouldn't stress test them more deeply, and we'll talk about that when we get to lending. But right now, there is no reason to assume that your market study isn't accurate or needs to be redone if it's been done recently. Right now, last thing is market studies can't heavily factor in online ordering, delivery, and curbside because we simply don't have data on it. We don't know what people are going to do after this, and food co-ops hadn't entered this space in a large way. There had been some experimentation, a few co-ops here and there until now. So we've got a month and a half of data. So we can't really say for sure. And again, go back to Michelle Schrei's video, please, on this. And really, she's got some really, what data we do have, she's gotten some great charts. She's got a lot of information about industry analysis, about what it means. And it doesn't, I think her analysis is excellent. And she points out that a lot of what's being shared out there doesn't mean what it seems like it means. And that there's a really good chance that, you know, shopper behavior around online ordering and curbside it's just not going to be as quickly or as largely impactful as people think. It's also expensive and it's costing co-ops money. And to help you guys get your mind around that, more like people like, oh, so we don't make as much money in that. No, you actually pay people to take the groceries. You're not, like, what we mean is if a co-op optimistically has a 2% profit margin to pay their debts and to replace any equipment, all that good stuff, and it's actually costing 4% or more on top of the regular costs to sell those groceries. You're literally giving away money on a $100 order. You're handing them $2, $4, whatever dollars to take the food away that you paid, that the co-op paid for. So I just want to make sure you're clear. That is one thing we know, is that if you are going to factor in a curbside purchasing, online purchasing, and this isn't just food co-ops. Again, watch what Michelle had to say. Nobody's doing this profitably yet. Everyone who's selling groceries this way, other than maybe Amazon, we didn't talk about that, are losing money on it. And so that's not likely to go away anytime soon. So it's something to keep in mind as your board makes decisions about whether to really pursue these types of online platforms for selling groceries in your business plan. All right, we're going to jump to real estate for a minute. We do know that the real estate market is likely to soften, and this is being caused by lots of businesses going out of business. You maybe didn't see it immediately, but anyone else seen several businesses go out of business or announced in the last month or so? The announcements are starting to come for all sorts of small businesses that are saying we're not going to reopen. And so this is going to hit retail particularly strong, and that means there will be more real estate available. Now, this was brought forward by Don Moffitt of Colluminate as a concept. This is completely Don. This never occurred to me. So I want to give all credit to Don. In his video of, I think it's Forward From Here. I think it's called Forward From Here. So it's in our, if you go to our YouTube, there's a COVIDeo series you can click on, and then all the videos are there, and you're looking for the one from Don Moffitt. He talks to this. This really came from him. So in many cases, you're going to have a lot more room to negotiate than before on property. This is, in a weird way, kind of a hidden silver lining to all this for y'all, because many startups are struggling to find affordable real estate or to find open real estate at all. So we would just say, keep in mind that that is the case, and that you should find someone who understands that and is willing to help you really push and negotiate with that new level of confidence. We've heard from some startups that they still have real estate brokers who are kind of pressuring them into sites and saying it might disappear, and this price, and we find that questionable. Maybe that's true in your community, but we also sometimes you need to actually advocate for yourself with these real estate experts. And so something you might consider reaching out to Don Moffitt about to get more advice, more professional advice. All right, last section in business development, financing. Conventional lenders are about to get more conservative than ever with commercial lending, especially retail. They already were. They already didn't like you. They don't like startups. It's not personal. They don't like startup businesses that much in good times. They definitely don't like them in times where they're not sure what's going on. So conventional lenders were unlikely to be your main source of funding anyway, but it just got tougher. When you are looking for lending partners, do look for local lenders that are dedicated to local and to impacting the local community, that take pride in that, who have helped other small businesses. Sometimes they will be able to make exceptions. They have special pools of money to make exceptions for higher risk projects that have great impact for the community. But mostly we're going to tell you, start looking at cooperative lenders and what are called CDFIs. These kinds of lenders are actually mission-based. They have money that they can put at not just any risk, but higher risk than your conventional lender. And they're looking for mission alignment. And right now, if you have mission alignment and if you can show that you're providing that kind of value that they're looking to, the way they're trying to improve the world through this lending and creating access, those are still good potential partners. For this one, take a look at the video we just did on lending with Christina Jennings from Shared Capital. That's also up on our YouTube site. She went much more in depth on this with an assist from Maggie Cohen, who's also on this call, talking about it. But really what we took away from it is things haven't changed a lot about the cooperative lenders. They already were looking very carefully since about, I want to say beginning of 2019, maybe mid 2018, for really financially stable, solvent projects with good leadership teams and a lot of momentum. And they were getting very picky because there had been some broader funding of all sorts of different kinds of startup food co-ops before that. And some of those didn't make it. And some of those that seemed like, sure bets struggled. And even one or two collapsed. And so they got a lot more careful about who they're funding in startup food co-op land, and that hasn't changed. And it sounds like the standards for how they'll decide who passes through that gauntlet and really probably will be likely to be successful hasn't really changed a lot. So the upshot is this situation hasn't really changed how they're funding startup food co-ops. It had already changed. Please do go look at that video. Christina talks in a lot more depth about what they're looking for. But really the standards, as far as we can tell from everything they said and we've listened to, aren't really going to change because of this. One of the things that they will be looking at, though, is that market studies, of course, potentially less reliable than in the past, and they're wanting to see you stress test those. If you don't know what that means, we can talk more in depth sometime, reach out to me, but it means that discounting you're doing, first you discount it. We always discount the market study. If you don't know that, again, reach out, let's talk. You discount the market study, and then you need to have also a study. You also need to have a pro forma version of what would you do if you missed those sales by, let's say, 10%, 20%. What would that look like? What would the co-op do? How could it pivot? How would it deal with that situation? And so they're going to be looking for that stress testing, that you're being realistic, that could happen, and not just going, well, hopefully everything will go well, but saying, okay, we still want to open this co-op knowing that it could happen. And if it does happen, we're going to do everything we can to prevent that. But if it does happen, that we have a realistic thought on how we'd pursue that. We're not just being pie in the sky, that we're ready to lead, whether the outcome is much higher sales than we expected, which sometimes happens, or lower. We're ready to lead regardless, and we have a clear eye on that. We're being realistic. So the other thing that Christina said that I really was glad to hear her get across is the percentage of the project that needs to be funded by the co-op itself, by its owners, has gone well up. And that's not going to go away. Remember, conventional lenders are very unlikely to work with you now, even those local ones, but give them a shot. Remember that cooperative lenders have had to get a lot more selective in who they fund, so they're not going to fund every startup. There are other CDFIs out there, but those partnerships can be even tougher to put together. So your outside lending options are going to be tough. The owners are going to have to fund more and more of this, not only because of lending options, but because the cost of the projects have gone up. It's going to take really determined, creative, innovative work to get these funded. Will people get startups funded? So yeah, we believe they will. We absolutely believe they will. Will every project get funded? No. We don't believe that necessarily will be the case, and we'll talk about that some more. So your board needs to take a critical look if the community has the excitement, the determination, the willingness to push this project forward, and if you're willing to take on the risk on behalf of your co-op of getting that project funded, and knowing that you're going to get creative. And co-ops have. Take a look at the recent success of Friendly Fredericksburg Food Co-op, raising the most that any startup food co-op has ever raised, ever. They started at 1.7 million last year, and they've decided to do a second arm of the campaign. I believe they're at or breaking 2 million. We have Oshkosh Food Co-op. The size of co-op they are, and the size of community. In the past, we would have been really impressed if they had broken 1 million. They broke way over 1 million. They used some innovative techniques to get that done. People are innovating and finding solutions, but the reality is your community has to fund this thing, the majority of this thing, and that's not going to go away. So as a board, you need to realize that's the new reality. Well, it kind of already was, but it's definitely the new reality. And are you up for this? And is it reasonable? Can the community do this? That's something you've been charged to assess. I don't think Michael is here with us. Michael, did you get back to the call? Okay. This was a quick slide from Michaela. We're only going to spend a second here because this is her thing. She is our director of development. But she wanted to speak for a moment about, yes, grants, donations, funds, the way they are functioning right now has been shook up. You're going to need free money, period, to make your pro forma work from somewhere. Donations, grants, foundations. And so what's happening in that realm? And the reality is that there's been a huge shakeup. And there is no clear pattern as of yet. Some are foundations and hospitals. Hospitals are often a good bet for food co-ops because of healthy food initiatives. Some of them are pouring that money in very directly because they want to react to COVID-19, and they aren't looking long distance right now. So some of them might be less willing to look at co-op projects. On the other hand, some foundations are much more interested right now, all of a sudden, in building solutions to food access that are long-term and will stick around because they've seen other solutions fell apart in this time. So it's kind of all a toss-up. What we should mostly say is that relationships are going to be everything right now. In a weird way, foundations and funds are more open to conversations that they used to be. Like, you had to be invited. They had a clear, narrow focus on what they do. They're questioning what they do right now. And if you know anyone who knows anyone who can get you an informal conversation at any of your local funds, these granting bodies, can get you in the door just enough that they would hear you out about your project. It's kind of like, you know, when you till the soil, the seed has a better chance. The soil's been tilled. So work any relationships you've been developing or might have. We've had people say, talk to Dorchester Food Co-op, you know, a friend of a friend, or this person who's on the board now, her son went to summer camp with my son. And so I reached out and vaguely reminded her that she vaguely knew me. And that allowed a conversation, and that might really bear fruit right now. There is more openness because they are rethinking what they're doing. We're not saying that'll guarantee funds. We're saying it is a good time to pursue any and all of those avenues, to be able to share what you're doing, share a pitch deck, to talk to them about how the co-op can address social ills that are happening right now. Okay. Quick business development synopsis. Costs have gone up rapidly in the last decade to develop a retail co-op, and that isn't necessarily going to slow down anytime soon because of COVID-19. There's all sorts of factors. So financing already was getting tough because of the cost of the projects and some more conservativeness on the part of lenders. So it's not about to get easier. You're going to have strong financial feasibility, and you're going to have determination and willingness to stick with the program, follow what's working for others, but also maybe think a little innovatively. It's not going to be an obvious shoe, like, we need to raise 2 million to do this, and 10 other co-ops have done that. Maybe one has, maybe two, maybe nothing in a community, nothing like yours. You're really going to have to factor that in and decide if that's something you're willing to take on. Again, can it be done? Yes, we've seen it done. We believe it can be done, but it's not easy. Real estate might have just become a buyer's leaser's game, though, and that might work seriously in your favor. Don't pass up that opportunity, and make sure you're working with the right partners who will push for you and for your co-op. And the changes in retail grocery that are coming are likely not as fast as all-encompassing as some fear. Take a look at that video again from Michelle Schrei. All right, that was business development. I need to get through all of this whole overview, folks, so I would love to stop and talk, but I'm going to try and plow through and save us like 10 minutes at the end to talk. So we're going to talk about ownership outreach. One thing we do know is that we've always called this area of work ownership outreach, and actually now I'm tempted, based on actually work done by the Neighboring Food Co-op Association. They're specifically the ones who convinced me that this section might be called community organizing, actually. That, you know, we keep focusing on growing ownership, which is a huge piece of community organizing work. But there are all sorts of community organizing principles of how we build a movement that aren't necessarily always being used by startups and are quite appropriate, especially in these times. So keep in mind the idea of growing a movement to build a co-op. And again, I don't think we've done a video on that yet with Neighborhood Food Co-op Association. If you're from their region, we just had a recent retreat that talked about this, so maybe I'll get her on screen sometime soon so the rest of you can hear this wisdom, because that is not my background. As Bonnie will tell you from Neighboring Food Co-op Association, you're a natural though. I'm like, yeah, but when you're subconscious at, you can't teach. So I'd love to have Bonnie on here to tell you guys more. But serving your co-op now in a way that is meaningful before the store is critical. Yet it needs to not soak all your energy, sap all your energy for opening the store, finding that balance. Some startups have chosen to not do anything right now, mostly because of capacity. They keep communicating, but they haven't really done any community initiatives or found a way to serve the community that doesn't sap all their resources. And some have gone hugely into community service in ways that could put them in danger of teetering over to not having enough focus and energy to really focus on the store. And we have seen that happen to startup food co-ops that intended to have a store, wanted to have a store, and started doing something now to prove their value that actually teetered them over. We're looking for a midpoint. So a lot of co-ops are actually just joining other community service organizations' existing programs, but providing people power, providing connections, providing promotion. And that is a really meaningful way to serve the community. So you're looking for things that kind of fit that balance. That's all I have time for on that today. But not being seen serving your community right now is a mistake. We're trying to show that the co-op has value already in the community, and it does. It already exists. It already has hundreds of people involved with it that are actually doing something, and we can show that and show our values through taking action in ways that don't distract from the organizing for our store and finding that balance. The exception is if you're in stage 3 or close to. If you have a site or about to have a site, you do not have time and energy for any other projects. And your way of serving the community going forward, major projects, is building that store. And that's absolutely an argument you can make meaningfully right now to your community, because they can see it tactile in front of them, right? As soon as there's a site, they can say, and we're going to build this grocery store that's going to do all this amazing stuff. It's not someday, it's here. And you need to focus your energy there, because for those of you who haven't experienced it yet, as soon as those site negotiations get serious, you're like at the top of the roller coaster. You know, you're at the top of and they're going, no, you're about to go, and then you go. Okay. And so once you go, once the site is announced, there isn't energy for anything else. Everything has to be focused on opening that co-op. Okay. Reach out to owners now. Please do check out the video In This Together by Kim Estes in the COVIdeo series. She makes a really great argument that it doesn't have to tax you heavily as a co-op. And I know a lot of you are doing this now. To reach out and make sure everyone's okay, get their feedback on the co-op in ways that just seem like you're helping, not being invasive and asking for anything. Check out that video for more. All right, community outreach. There's only 2 in this one, so we'll get through this. Number 2 in community ownership and outreach: speak and find your narrative. Do not go dark or slow down communications. Now, I know some of you have done this because of capacity issues. I get it. But it actually is a very dangerous time to do that. People are looking to see who's showing up. They're also looking to see which ones aren't going to make it. I mean, we're there, people, Organizations that aren't talking right now, people are kind of assuming aren't going to make it, that they don't have the vitality to push through. They need to see you showing up, even just talking about why the co-op matters to this moment, but they need to see you. You need to be visually present. You need to be in their feeds. You need to be in their, your newsletters coming out. They need to hear from you and know the co-op is not only still around, but is actually a terrific way to invest their energy in addressing these things they're so concerned about. Don't go dark right now if you can avoid it. And some people say, we're not dark. I'm like, yeah, but I've looked at your feed and you've gone from 5 posts a week to 1 to 2. And that is kind of the equivalent. So we got to keep that communication up. Remember, it's the only storefront you have. Your narrative will need retooling based on these big social shakeups that just happened, and take the time to consciously retool it, okay? On the other hand, there is no time like now for the discussion of co-ops and how we can get together and build power together to solve problems. This really is our moment as startup food co-ops, and a lot of folks don't feel it. There's a lot of nervousness, like, oh, but you know, people are going through a lot. They are. And you know what helps people get through a lot? Hope. Doing stuff with their neighbors, feeling like they did something this week that gives the world a better shot at not being like this next year. That is something people need no matter what's going on in their lives. So we want to be careful, again, retooling the message about how we ask for money, those sorts of things. Although I don't think you should be shy of asking for ownership right now if done correctly. And actually a lot of co-ops that are in mixed income or low income neighborhoods have had great growth in ownership right now. So don't assume that part either. Don't assume for people where they want to invest right now in a future that they can believe in, but find a way to communicate it with compassion. So for this, we got some terrific videos. Check out the COVIdeos, People Like the Internet with Heather Laskus of 7 Roots, and Messaging at Uncertain Times with Katie Novak. Both are terrific starter guides to how to start to think about this narrative you need to craft. All right, last section is governance. I swear it only has 2 slides and we're gonna talk. The last section is governance. Vision is actually the first part I want to talk to you more than any other about this. And that is because some of you found that this happened, there were some unexpected shakeups in board alignment. And I'll talk about what this means. That you're like, oh no, we still agree about what the co-op is, but the shakeup happened, you know, this big shakeup happened beyond your control, and some were like, we shouldn't push forward right now. We shouldn't ask for membership. Some said, now more than ever, we should be asking. There was kind of like this, like, what is the co-op's role in all this? What is co-op's role in the community? And even some tension, even amongst people who otherwise agree about the project and respect one another. Please don't sweep that under the rug, because if you don't have board unity on the vision and the direction of the vision right now, it will make everything else a lot less just ineffective. So you need to take a look at your vision and say, does this still resonate? Hold that vision of your co-op and say, in this moment, you know, this difficult moment, do we believe this is exactly what the community needs to move forward? It is meaningful, it is powerful, this vision of what we can accomplish, and for what? You know, for food access, for good jobs, whatever your core values are. Do those make you want to get out of bed and do this to actually answer this moment? And does it do that for your owners? Because if it isn't the case, if you feel like we started it with this idea and we all agree upon it, but it's kind of, sometimes people ask us, why are we doing this co-op? And we're struggling to speak to that, you know, listen to that for a moment. Because without real clarity that this work you're doing to start a retail co-op can address this moment, and being able to speak to that with just precision about how and why and what values we'll be focusing on that address this, you're not going to go forward. Remember, you're going to have to fund 70% or more of this. The community's got to own this. This has to be theirs. If your vision is wishy-washy, it's time to take a pause and figure it out as a board if you really have clarity and drive for this vision. That said, capacity is the other thing that shook out during all this. And we didn't see this one right away. There were sudden shifts in board capacity. So we led you through our pause and assess that we do with everyone during crisis. Like, here's how to pause and assess what to do next. But a lot of what came out that we didn't tell you to assess is the board's own capacity. What shifted very rapidly was how much time and energy the existing board had for the project. And we needed to talk that through. I think Whitewater did a great job here, so I'm pointing to them in this note, which is the chair actually interviewed each person on the board individually, compassionately, just to check in and see how they're doing, how much energy they have for the co-op right now, and then led a board discussion on what this means for their overall capacity to drive the project forward. And we really suggest you do the same if you have not done that yet, and not assume. Some boards have been assuming and saying, no, everyone says they're all in, but then things aren't getting done. That might mean there's hidden capacity issues. They want to be all in, but things have shifted in their life. So let's have those conversations because we need to know where the board's at. You are the driving force. You are one of the most precious resources in any startup food co-op, you, the board. And we have to know where the tank is at. And we have to start from there. Did you pause and assess? Did you decide as a board where to focus capacity? You might now have less capacity than you did before, and you need to pick carefully, not your, but this should be done, but this should be done. But you only have this much capacity. Where should you be focused? Where is the leverage? Where is what's going to help your call get forward the most, and what can be set aside? Make sure you've done that as a board. And if your capacity has gone up, and you're like, our capacity has actually gone up, and it's happened to a few of you, you still should be assessing what is the best place to put our capacity right now after all this change to move the project forward. Let's not just willy-nilly apply it. If the board doesn't have really decent capacity right now, that's where you have to stop and focus. This is the place. If you don't have board capacity, nothing else is really going to matter. It will all fall apart eventually. I've seen terrific paid outreach coordinators out there getting owners, but it falls apart because we're just getting ownership and we're communicating a little bit. We're tipping over and falling over because the main engine, the board, is not there to weave that into the rest of the development of the organization. Or a terrific project manager who's out there finding sites. Doesn't matter if the board isn't there to pull it together, make sure the ownership growth is happening, communication, and to make sure that this makes sense on a feasibility level, these sites they're finding, and it still falls apart. The board is key. If you have capacity for nothing else, keep communicating and regrow that board. Get some new people on it. Many boards though right now, so silver lining upshot, actually are getting new board members. Don't assume that everybody's capacity is decreased no matter what your community. Don't underestimate people's need to be part of something meaningful. A lot of boards have reported to me in the last month that they have some new people on their boards who are bringing skills, who are driven, professionals, people a lot of people who were kind of semi-retired and weren't planning to fully retire for 5 years and suddenly have found themselves fully retired because of the changes happening, and they're looking to apply that energy. That's become a very common story we're hearing. Don't assume that for people. Tell people this is, if you've got your messaging down, this is your opportunity to come in and affect change. Here's what we're working on. Are you the right fit for that? Have one-on-one coffees with folks. Siobhan spoke to this beautifully from Alphabet in, what was it, Pivoting Your Leadership, which is one of our COVIDeo series. She talked about as board chair, how she used the moment to go out and actually have one-on-ones and coffees and attract new board talent that is now on the job and doing amazing stuff. So and then of course, check out our COVIDeo, the decision to pause. I go through all of this in more depth, checking out your capacity, where you should focus your energy and why. All right, I will get to this part. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'll get to this later. We're gonna do a little talking because we've got time, and then we'll get to my last slides. I'm going to pull up the chat and see what we've got going on here. Is anybody, questions, comments on any portion of that? Disagreements, y'all know I welcome those. You're allowed to disagree. And it is okay for consultants and co-op leaders to also jump in. So if anyone is wanting to speak, if you could just let me know in the chat so I don't have 3 people trying to talk at once. But happy to talk about anything you just shared.
I'll go, I guess, since folks seem to be quiet. Hi, everyone. Michaela from Sola Food Co-op. I think everything that you shared is spot on. And I mean, the best thing, because I think we're all in this startup kind of cooperative space, and there was such a fear and such a just unknowing, how to operate in this space. So I think it's been really helpful just to have this series and to know that, yes, it's okay to actually pause and assess and figure out what your capacity is to move forward. And I think, so there's been a lot of lessons learned, not only through the series, obviously, but just like us as a co-op too. Like even like right now, we're in our member drive campaign and really figuring out like, okay, does it make sense to like move forward? Like I remember having the conversation in like April and May about like, does this make sense, to move forward? Like we're asking people for money and, this could be a little bit sensitive. And I'm such a like an optimist, but also like, well, we signed up to get this work done, and like now more than ever, like our community really needs a grocery store, and it is best if it is like community owned, so being able to like move forward in that way and in that space, because you did pause and assess and ask some of the questions and figure out how to move forward, and all of that has been really great. And then the other thing I just wanted to share is yeah, we've been really successful this month so far, like superseding our goal. But I would say that, just reminding, I'm always reminding our board of 13, where like maybe 10 are the most active, that, we have 100 plus, people to kind of help move this effort forward. So, just to be reminding like, and I'm really good at like assessing a person, hearing what someone says and like giving them a task, you know what I mean? And not everyone is good at that. So if you're not the person, even if you're the chair or the founder or whatever, you're not the person who's good at like, oh, it was just so funny because our founder was like, yeah, this woman, she's always emailing me and asking me stuff. And I'm like, but why would you just keep that? Like, share it with someone else who can like give her something to do, because there's a reason why she keeps on, bugging you. So, she wants to work, she wants to help. So
I think that, I mean, actually, thank you, Michaela, because I think that is wise. I think startups don't realize that just because sometimes they have a hard time as an individual engaging volunteers and getting people involved doesn't mean no one else can do it. And there are some people out there with the natural talent. And so I hear a lot of boards saying, well, people don't volunteer, people don't volunteer. I'm like, people do volunteer if they know the value of a project and somebody knows how to plug them in. Now, if that talent doesn't already exist on your team, I respect that. You don't like, it's not a diss, but don't assume no one else could do it. You need someone like Michaela to do that. And don't assume no one knows how to do it. So I think that's really profound. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is the difference. Some of you are seeing a lot more volunteers, a lot more owners, and some of you are really struggling. That doesn't mean you suck. It means you don't have the right person in charge of either messaging or getting volunteers plugged in. And take a look what Soul has been doing, because they haven't had to up their messaging game that much. They have for sure, but that much to get the kind of response they've gotten, because they have known how to plug in the people who follow up with them. And so just go take a look what they've been doing on social media. I think it's an interesting story, because I'd say, yeah, they up their game a little, but all of a sudden the owners are there, right? So it's cool to see. Okay, I'm gonna go to the comments because some people aren't into it. I think I need to request that all of our board members view this. It's so concisely done, thanks. That was our hope. Thank you, Kathy. And actually, nobody leave until I'm done, because I have also the really big warnings and the pep talk. I end with the pep talk, so don't miss it, okay? Because there is reason to be still excited about what we're doing. Peterson mostly agreed to Kathy. Most of our board is not going to participate in the sessions, and this summary is perfect and quick to share. And that's also why I'm referencing a lot of the other videos and experts that were involved in creating this synopsis, because if your board is watching this and they're like, well, that's what FCI thinks, I want them to know that that was based on the input of dozens of others and experts and people who know what they're doing. So they don't have to go watch those videos, but it's human nature. If they know those videos exist, they know more research has been done. Excellent. Other comments, questions, lessons you've learned about some of the things that we're talking about, that I've already talked about today during this time? All right, I'm just gonna go into some of my slides and then see if you have something to say then, okay? This is very untalkative for you all. I'm going to, there we go, get that going. All right, so we're gonna talk about some wrap-up thoughts here too. So business development, I need to be really direct and honest, okay? Business development is getting tougher, and that's not going away. When I started working with Startup Food Co-ops almost exactly 5 years ago, I did 5 years and 2 weeks, And I had been supporting them as a general manager before that, but really working at FCI, business development was easier than it is now. And that started happening a couple of years ago. But that's not going away the way it's gotten tougher. It takes more than ever to get to opening day. It's going to take a very powerful vision, a vision that you care about and you feel good about, but like can't articulate, and only a certain there's only, you've developed a core group who are excited about it, but it just isn't getting beyond that. I have seen startups with visions with a lot of power, and I have seen startups with visions that have floundered, that have then recentered and found what the real vision is of those who have joined, and you might need to do that. And occasionally I've seen startups with visions that they're good visions, but in a time of crisis, people are going to make other choices for how to solve what they want to solve in their community. So make sure that vision is truly powerful. But in the end, the board is responsible for assessing if feasibility is actually there. That's your job. Not finding feasibility for a retail grocery co-op in your community is not a failure. And I need to say this because I want to just make sure that none of you are laying awake at night avoiding having the hard conversations about whether your project is still feasible or was ever feasible, because you think finding it not is a failure. I say it isn't. You were charged to find out if this was a feasible, viable solution for your community. It absolutely is in some communities, in many communities, but it isn't for every community. And it's just gotten tougher. And actually, most of the tougher that just happened, I think people will think it's because of COVID-19, but it was already happening. That's mostly what we found, is most of the tougher had already happened. This hasn't really made it that much tougher. It's the tougher that was already there in the last couple of years. But not finding feasibility is a viable option and outcome. Your community might need to address this vision a different way. And if that's what you find, you have served your community well. You have not led them down a primrose path. You have not led them into putting energy into something that you're pretty sure can't manifest. And you can look at other options with them. And you have taught them about coming together, bringing their power together, community voice, coming with solutions together. And the co-op doesn't have to dissolve. It can get the owners together and think of other ways that you want to meet this vision. And that has happened. We're here to help people start retail grocery co-ops. That's what we know how to do. But if you find it's not viable to do that, we're 100% behind you, and we'll help you transition into thinking through what you want to do next. Whether it's dissolve, get the community together, come up with a completely different idea, whatever it is. So you have to accept that not finding feasibility is always possible until a certain point in your development. And that's not a failure. That's a service to your community. And then you think about what's next. Okay? That said, we believe many of you can and will get open to serve your communities in some really powerful ways. So here's the pep talk part though. Never has the alternative of the cooperative model been more needed than in this moment. We need alternatives that are owned by communities, that bring power back to communities, and never has there been a moment, now there are moments as much, but never more have we needed it. This is a moment where the message of cooperation is going to take. It always does in times like this. So if you can figure out how to retool that message and send it back out and see first if there's really buy-in from the community, it's worth another test if you're doubting it, because with the right message, this is a message that people are ready for, cooperation and business cooperation as a community. Never have our communities needed to come together more to find their collective power. Never has food justice been on the minds of more people and more important. So the work you're doing right now is sending out ripples throughout the community and beyond. There are so many times I wish there's so many established co-ops that I've been able to tell, you know what, you know that co-op that just opened over here? They actually, the person from there used to be an owner here, or they visited your store and they're like, oh my God, this is exactly it. And their board was driven by what you guys do. You know, of that Food for All program that you have, that was developed by this co-op, and they did all this work, and then they found out you're doing it, and you're doing work right now, and you're developing leaders. People are looking at themselves differently, how they can engage with their community. You're getting conversations happening that are going to have ripples. It is valuable work. It just isn't easy, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be made tougher, if anything, in a lot of ways by this moment. Because you know what? Cooperation is actually kind of radical. It's kind of a people-driven radical solution. And that is not necessarily what our times in the, however you want to see the powers that be, that is not necessarily what they want to feed right now, because it's powerful. So we know that actually in some ways, if you have the right vision, communities can probably do this in some ways more than ever, because we are seeing you raise huge amounts of money from your community because they get it and they get what this is worth to them. And we are seeing people getting ownership numbers up higher and higher and higher because their community gets it and understands the value of this. So don't lose heart. That's different than honestly assessing feasibility. So there's a difference. There is no reason to lose heart about the cooperative work you're doing and the power of it and the importance to your community. But you do have to find your confidence in what you're doing and what's meaning to the community, communicate it, and honestly assess feasibility on behalf of your community. And we believe you can do that. And we're here to help if you need help doing that. All right. So Maggie, okay, thank you, Maggie. Grant, I kind of take your point on the board being thus charged, but I'm not sure how the owners would see it. Yeah, because we didn't go out and say, hey, join us so we can reach feasibility. And actually, I've encouraged lots of startups in the early stages to do just that. I actually say, we have this great vision and we want you to join so we can find out if we can bring this kind of grocery store to our community. And people say, I don't want to say that because it doesn't sound strong enough. And then you get caught in this cycle where you've promised a grocery store. I hear that. Yeah, some owners might go, oh, but you promised us a grocery store. But honestly, when we've seen co-ops not reach feasibility, we've actually seen, or had you say, not this site or not this exact project, this isn't feasible, we kind of need to restart. We've seen the vast majority of owners understand it if it's communicate well and go along and actually start to understand a little better that it is theirs and they have a responsibility to it. We found that co-ops that have decided to completely stop pursuing retail grocery stores have had a lot of owners turn out to talk about alternatives. So yeah, no, you're right. You're the one, I've been there, who's going to have to wake up the next day and answer all the emails if you end up telling someone it's not feasible, telling your owners. And that's hard to imagine getting through. I've been there. Wasn't a co-op startup, but it was opening stores, and you've invested all this time and excitement and gotten people on board, and then you have to say this isn't the right thing to do. But you will get through it. Most people will beyond forgive you. Actually, owners of Wild Root just decided that they cannot go forward with their site in Racine, Wisconsin. And they've been working for 10 years, and they had fully funded their owner loan campaign. And the rest of the funding is not there. It didn't come through. And they can't go forward. And they had happen, what I've seen happen a lot of startups, which is the vast majority of owners thanked them, understood it, and wanted to know what was next. So don't let a couple angry voices make you feel responsible for the entire world on your shoulders. You might not have said it correctly. You could have explained it better, and a few people are going to be upset. I get that. But they charged you on their behalf. You've been working on their behalf. It's not the other way around. You've been doing for them. You didn't take their money so you can go off and do something. And don't let that narrative get changed by a couple people, or even a couple dozen people who didn't understand that. Other people do and will. I've seen that consistently. Katie, I see you nodding, and I know you've been in there helping Wild Root. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I think it's important that you had brought this up, Jacqueline, and acknowledge it as a point, because in organizing Green Top and other co-ops, that's always a hard place to be. No one wants to fail or say this isn't going to work. And I think before we laid it out on the table, kind of the expectation is that you do make it work, figure out the pro forma, wiggle it away around so this will all play out and we can open our store. And in reality, that's a disservice to our owners, because if we wiggle those numbers, if we make it work and the store flounders and doesn't succeed, we've put everyone at even greater risk. So I think it's important to acknowledge it when it happens and agree that it's not a failure, and that we are charged with the fiduciary responsibility of taking care of the capital these people have given us via owner shares and loans.
And do keep in mind, they charged you whether they really wanted to think it through or not to use that money to develop the co-op. So people are like,
Yeah.
oh my God, we can't return all their money. $200 did not make or break almost anyone who was one of your owners. Almost anyone. Trust me. It just didn't. They made an investment in a possibility and a dream. And you're going to say, well, that's not how we sold. That's what it. But in the end, it is actually the truth. And if you feel like you didn't word it quite right. The other part is, I like what just Katie said about wiggle room and wiggling. Every co-op, that startup co-op that's gotten open has had to take performance and go, oh God, what else can we do to this? What about a different site? Let's wiggle this. We're talking about acceptable wiggles, ones that have been tested by other experts in the field. So yeah, that could work. Or yes, we've seen that. Or okay, I see where you're going with this. It's a little risky, but you understand the risk. Okay, it's okay. Then I've seen other co-ops say, we can afford $70 per square foot for build out. So we're going to put that in there when it should be 110. And we'll just find someone who'll do it for that. No, you won't. So there's a difference between fudging and working hard to be innovative, creative, and try different solutions. When we get to fudging, we don't have feasibility. All right. I got a couple more comments. I'll check those out real quick down here. This is part of Durham's story, a site and capital campaign followed by a Great Recession. Several years passed while we searched for the, Don, why don't you just unmute and share this? I think it's really pertinent to the moment, if you don't mind.
No, I always love telling the story, but yeah, no, we had a location, we had a plan, we had a capital campaign, we held our co-op annual meeting, on the site. This is what we're going to do, and then it didn't come to pass, and we spent several years looking at sites, trying to figure out how to finance it until it finally did, come together. And in part because we spent all that time working on it, talking to everyone in the community, that brought together a lot of players at the end that made it all. I mean, there was so many different groups involved in putting it together, because we'd been telling the story, owning the story, and it's what made it possible.
I love that story because it's the same stories I've had. I mean, often some of you've had. It's when you're most like ready to give up and you've tried everything. New players come to the table, new opportunities, because you were out there telling the story. Somebody heard the story and they decided to join your board, and suddenly Asset Food Co-op has a project manager who can kick butt after they were almost ready to give up on finding a site. I know, you go out there and you tell the story, and all of a sudden a developer who has land is really bought into the meaning of your story and wants to work with you. I'm not saying you sit around and wait forever for that to happen, but like Don said, telling the story has brought it together when it seemed like it wasn't going to work many times. That's different than having no feasibility, though. Don's team knew what it would take to get feasibility while they were telling that story. Is that correct, Don?
Oh, yeah. We had a project manager with a lot of experience.
What was Don? So I'm going to wrap us up. I do want to mention that the one thing we have not addressed in feasibility, and it's important, is store design. And Nicole Klimek will be here from 7 Roots next week on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Central Time, along with Kevin O'Donnell from that team, talking about how store design is already changing and how they would change it to make your stores more viable into the future. You asked for this topic is important. They just couldn't do it before this week. So they'll be here Wednesday. And you guys asked for one more topic in the Board Chair Confidential. So Monday at 3 p.m., I will be doing the Board Chair Confidential with folks. It's half full or more than half full, but it's not all the way full, on how to do accountability in the time of COVID-19 and online meetings. You've all found boards have reacted kind of oddly and in different ways to being held accountable now in the time of COVID-19 and how we do that effectively. So we're going to have that conversation on Monday. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this series. We owe a great debt to Katie, to Don, to the 7 Roots team, to Firebrand team, to the whole Colluminate team, many Colluminate team people who've been here, to you guys, Kim Estes from Market 166, to Astabet Food Co-op, to Prairie. You guys have made something really incredible happen, and I think brought together an understanding of this moment in just a couple months that could have taken years. So we are grateful to all you for coming and participating, as well as to those who have given us their expertise. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great weekend.